That night, after a 4-day business trip in Boston, I returned home to Riverside Heights. The trip had lasted longer than expected, leaving me exhausted, my shoulders still aching from carrying my laptop around all week. I wanted nothing more than a hot shower, a simple meal, and a quiet moment to tell my husband, Richard, that I had successfully saved a major contract the company almost lost. At 52, I was used to carrying burdens. From home to work, whatever was difficult, I tried my best to handle it. But no matter how busy I was, I always longed for the moments when I could return home, because I always believed home was the safest place for me. That night, I believed the same. As soon as my car stopped in front of the house, I saw the living room lights on. Strange. At this hour, Richard was usually in his study reading the paper, and Ryan, my son, would be in his room upstairs. My mother, Marjorie, only visited on weekends, and my sister, Chloe, never came unless she needed something. I didn't think much of it. Maybe they wanted to welcome me back after the long trip. I smiled softly, thinking I was truly fortunate. I opened the door and stepped inside, but instead of laughter or greetings, I saw 4 people sitting neatly on the sofa as if attending a formal meeting. Richard sat in the middle, arms crossed as though waiting for someone to announce something. On his right was my mother, her petite frame tense, her hands clasped tightly together. On his left was Chloe, my sister, her face perfectly made up, her eyes gleaming in a way that instantly unsettled me. Ryan, my son, stood before them. When I walked in, he didn't run to hug me like he always did. He stood blocking my way, like a wall. "What are you doing, Ryan?" I asked softly as a chill ran down my spine. Ryan looked at me with eyes I had never seen before. Cold, distant. None of the warmth of the child I had raised for 22 years. "You're no longer the one who makes decisions in this house." His voice was firm, as if rehearsed many times. I thought I misheard. I looked at Richard, hoping for an explanation, but he only lifted his head slightly before avoiding my eyes. Chloe didn't look away. She leaned back on the sofa, crossed her legs, and looked at me with a triumphant gaze I never imagined she would direct at me. "Linda," she said softly but full of implication, "you should understand that Richard is happier with me. We're more compatible than you think." The whole room tightened. No one said another word, but their eyes said more than enough. I realized that the very people I loved most, the ones I had spent my life caring for and protecting, were now united against me. Before I continue with what happened after that moment, if you, especially the women watching, have ever felt the sting of being turned away by the people you love most, let me know by hitting subscribe. We are here to share, to support one another, and to be a resting place for the stories life doesn't make easy. Thank you for staying to hear the rest of this journey. I don't remember how long I stood frozen after Ryan's words. Maybe only a few seconds, but long enough for me to realize that no matter what I said at that moment, none of them genuinely wanted to hear it. I set my suitcase on the floor, steadied my breath, and said very quietly, "All right, I'll step outside for a bit." No one stopped me. No one asked where I was going. No one asked if I was okay. I turned away, my hand trembling as I opened the door, not because of anger, but because my heart was beating in a rhythm completely foreign, the rhythm of someone who had just lost her home. When I stepped outside, the door closed softly behind me, but that soft click felt like the whole world had just shut itself off from me. I didn't argue, didn't raise my voice, didn't cry. Perhaps at 52, one no longer has the strength to fight with one's own family. I got in the car, started the engine, and drove away without looking back. The next morning, just as the sun began to rise, my phone showed 112 missed calls. I saw Richard's name, Ryan's name, and even my mother's, Marjorie. But I didn't open any of them. That night, I left in silence. And maybe they only called back because they feared losing control, not because they were worried about me. I drove along the long road leading toward downtown Riverside Heights. The city wasn't too crowded at night, the yellow streetlights stretching across the pavement in long, blurry streaks. A cold wind slipped through the window crack, making me shiver. I used to love these streets. I used to think that just by driving across the Riverside Bridge and seeing the tall buildings in the distance, I would feel I belonged here. But tonight, the place I once called home had become the beginning of a deep wound. Quietly, I asked myself, what did I do wrong to end up like this? Behind the steering wheel, I felt the emptiness spreading through my chest. When I was younger, I always longed to go home whenever I was tired. But now, that very place was the coldest in my life. I pulled over for a few minutes to calm down. Other cars passed by, their lights sweeping across my face. The city stayed alive, but I felt completely left behind. As I continued driving, I found myself thinking about my life. 25 years of building a family. 25 years trying to be the pillar for my husband, my child, my mother, and my sister. I always believed that if I endured a little more, compromised a little more, the family would stay peaceful. And like most women, the older we get, the less we want to fight for anything. We only hope for calm days to live out our years, but peace was something that never seemed to belong to me. I murmured a thought that only women who have tasted enough sweetness and bitterness truly understand. The older a woman gets, the less she wants to fight, but no one deserves to be stripped of their dignity. I had been silent for too long. I had sacrificed too much. But that night, I realized one thing. Silence is not always beneficial. On the dimly lit road, I kept driving, not knowing where the night would end. Only knowing that, for the first time in many years, I felt truly alone. When I stood at the threshold of the living room that night, I realized something every woman fears to face. The people she loves most are often the ones who turn out to be the coldest. The air in the house felt frozen. No one stepped forward to take the suitcase from my hand. No one asked if I was tired. No one bothered to look into my eyes to see what I had just been through. Richard leaned back on the sofa as if the verdict about me had already been decided. My mother only lowered her head, avoiding my gaze, as though she feared seeing something that might shake her. But the most painful thing was Ryan, my son. The child I once stayed up all night to nurse through fevers, the one I searched the whole city for just to find the basketball shoes he wanted, now stood with his arms crossed like a stranger. I hadn't even asked a question when my eyes fell on a small detail, one enough to make my heart clench. Richard had placed his hand on Chloe's leg, not by accident, not in the way a husband touches his wife, but in a way meant to tell me clearly where he stood. I had lived through many things in my life, but that moment felt like someone had drained the breath right out of me. I looked at Richard for a long time, hoping he would pull his hand away. He didn't. Chloe raised her eyebrows slightly, as if reminding me that I had already lost before I ever stepped into this house. The whole room felt like a courtroom. I stood alone facing 4 people, and not one of them stood on my side. I didn't scream. I didn't question them. At my age, you understand that words spoken in pain are rarely understood. I simply said quietly, "You're standing in front of me like this. You're not even going to greet me, Ryan." Ryan lowered his head, but he didn't move, didn't come toward me. I saw his shoulders tremble slightly, yet he didn't change his stance. I kept my voice soft, though my heart felt as if it were being crushed. I was gone for 4 days. I hoped someone would at least ask if I was okay. No one answered. I looked at each of them, searching for even the slightest sign of compassion. All I received was silence. There is perhaps nothing more painful than a mother seeing the child she raised with all her heart turn away at the moment she needs him most. That kind of heartbreak isn't loud. It's quiet, heavy. It settles deep in the chest like a bruise that only shows its true color days later. I swallowed everything I wanted to say and turned my head slightly to breathe. When I looked back, I asked only one question. "So, what is it that you want me to do?" No one responded directly, but I understood. They wanted me to leave the house I had kept for more than 20 years. They wanted me to disappear quietly, as if I had never existed in their lives. And I understood something else. That moment was when I lost my family, at least the version of it I once believed in. I left my own home that night in a silence so cold it felt sharp. I thought I would drive for a while to calm down, then return once everyone had settled. But I was wrong. When the car signaled that it was running low on gas, I pulled into a station near the Riverside Highway. I took out the familiar bank card I had used for every household expense for more than 20 years. I swiped the card. A message appeared. The transaction cannot be processed. I tried again. No change. I opened the banking app on my phone. The screen asked me to log in again. I entered my password, but it said it was incorrect. I tried once more. Still wrong, as if someone had changed everything before I even understood what was happening. I stood there for a long time under the dim yellow light, my hands trembling slightly. I'm not someone who panics easily, but the feeling of having my financial control, something I had managed my entire life, stripped away hit me like an unexpected slap. I once believed Richard, and I built everything together. But clearly he had prepared to remove me from his life, one step at a time. I opened my wallet. Only $40, a few coins, and an old receipt. $40, an amount so small I usually wouldn't bother noticing it. But that night, it was all I had. I spent $25 on gas, 3 more on a bottle of water. The sound of the coins hitting the change tray tightened my throat. People often say, a middle-aged woman doesn't fear poverty. She fears having her life's work taken from her. And that night, I understood that truth completely. Not because I mourned the money, but because I never imagined I would one day be pushed out by my own family like this. I sat in the car for a few minutes, holding the bottle of water, watching the night swallow the unfamiliar road ahead. At that moment, being 52 felt like being an empty shell. Everything beautiful inside me had been taken away by someone else. I drove for a long stretch until my eyes burned and my head felt heavy. A flickering neon sign appeared by the road. Maple Inn Motel. Vacancy. I exhaled, half reluctant, half defeated. Tonight, I had no other choice. The motel lobby was small, filled with the mixed smell of dampness and bleach. The clerk handed me a metal key without even looking up. Room 7, a sagging bed, wrinkled sheets with yellowed stains. A heater that rattled as if tired of working. Outside, trucks roared past one after another, but the thing that unsettled me the most was the silence inside myself. For the first time in many years, I was sleeping alone in a strange place. No voice calling. Mom? No one asks, you're home? No shoulder to lean on, not even for a moment. I sat at the edge of the bed, gripping my hands to stop the shaking. People often think older women are strong, resilient, and used to enduring. But in truth, we are still deeply vulnerable when family is no longer by our side. That night, I cried. Not because I lost my home, not because my accounts were locked, but because, for the first time in my life, I felt utterly alone. In that spare motel room, I couldn't sleep. Memories returned one after another, light as mist but sharp as tiny needles. I grew up in a small house in the suburbs. Back then, my mother, Marjorie, always showed favoritism toward my sister Chloe. Chloe had been pretty from a young age, bright blue eyes and a smile that made everyone want to indulge her. I, on the other hand, was skinny and quiet as a child. I was often given the household chores, the cleaning, cooking, and taking care of everything, while Chloe would be forgiven with a smile. I was an outstanding student. I remember hoping my mother would look at me and say, "Linda, I'm proud of you." But that sentence never came. I remember the day I received my acceptance letter to the business management program. I ran into the kitchen to show my mother. She only replied, good, but go pick up Chloe for me. She's tired." I got used to being the one who carried the burdens. So used to it that I didn't notice I was being trained to become the family's invisible pillar, a sacrifice that was never properly acknowledged. I met Richard when I was 27, at a time when I had just begun to make some progress in my career. He had a warm smile and knew how to say the words I had waited for all my youth. He called me the most intelligent woman he had ever met. He said he admired my work ethic. He told me I was different from other women. Strong, capable, responsible. Those words, now were like the ones I had lacked all my life from my mother. Perhaps that's why I fell in love too quickly, trusted too much. The night by the living room doorway when I saw Richard place his hand on Chloe's leg, I suddenly understood something I should have realized sooner. I hadn't escaped my old family pattern. I had only repeated it in a different form. A man who wanted to be served. A family that valued appearances and temporary satisfaction over true loyalty. A woman expected to shoulder everything was then pushed aside when she was no longer convenient. Realizing that made my heart ache, but it also clarified things more than ever before. Chloe had been accustomed to being pampered since childhood, and that habit persisted as she grew older. She was beautiful, that's true. But the more beautiful she was, the more she came to believe that others would solve her problems. When Chloe had credit card debt, I was the one who paid it. When she couldn't afford rent, I covered it to save the family's face. When she complained about trouble finding a job, I found a position for her at the company, even though I knew she wasn't qualified for it. At the time, I thought I was helping. Looking back now, I understand that I helped nurture that irresponsibility. And one day, the person I had helped not only turned her back on me, but she also took away what I cherished most. I sat on the motel bed thinking about this for a long time. Perhaps we, older women, are too accustomed to carrying the burdens, and in doing so, we unintentionally teach others to see us as a given, rather than as people deserving respect. The next morning, in the chilly motel room where I had to rub my hands together to warm them, I opened the personal laptop I always took on business trips. Richard must have thought that by locking my accounts and driving me out of the house, I would have no way to access the company. But he forgot one thing. Harrington Estates was a company I had built with my own experience and hands. I was the one who created the file structures, the internal management workflows, and even the emergency features Richard never bothered to learn. I tried logging in using an old string of passwords. Passwords Richard never remembered. And just as I expected, the system opened immediately. No need for high technical skill. Just remember that I had been the one behind everything, meticulous about every detail, quietly keeping the machine running for more than 20 years. Now, that same meticulousness became the doorway that allowed me to see the truth. I began reviewing the reports Richard used to say were quicker if I handle them. The deeper I looked, the colder my hands felt. They had started transferring company assets to another entity, a shell company named Chloe Management Group. The legal representative listed is Chloe Harrington. Regular transfers, internal reports edited, and then I saw what made my heart drop, my signature. Appearing on many documents I had never seen. Not my real signature, a copied version, repeated exactly. Something that would be exposed if someone who knew me well were to examine it. I held my breath and scrolled further. I found records of payments labeled family support sent to my mother. Periodic transfers with no clear explanation, but I understood the reason. This was how Richard and Chloe kept my mother on their side. Part of me wanted to believe my mother was unwitting, but another, darker part, the part that hurt the most, knew she understood what she was doing. I leaned back in the chair and breathed deeply. It wasn't only that they had deceived me. They had used my trust, my kindness, the family bonds I had protected for half my life, to fuel a scheme against me. I stared at the lit screen in the dark room, my hand tightening slightly. But what rose in me was not fury. It was pain. a slow, deep pain, as if I had been watching a pure version of myself being exploited for years without knowing. I whispered to no one. The ones I loved most used my kindness as a stepping stone. I had thought that if I always gave, if I endured a little more, if I kept my patience, people would eventually appreciate my heart. But the truth is, not everyone knows how to value that. Some treat kindness as a gift. Others see it as an opportunity to take more and more. In that moment, I was no longer the woman who had been betrayed the night before. I became the woman who saw the nature of the problem clearly. The family I had protected with love operated on selfishness, and my silence had unintentionally given them room to grow in the wrong way. I closed my eyes for a few seconds to steady my breath. Then I opened them slowly. It was time for me to stand up and defend myself, not for revenge, but to reclaim the respect I deserved. Once I saw clearly what Richard and Chloe had done behind my back, I knew I couldn't act impulsively. The years I spent working behind the scenes in the company had taught me one thing. Anything that needs to stand firm must be built from the strongest bricks. I opened each folder and downloaded the essential documents, the list of assets that had been transferred, the falsified reports, the transactions funneled into Chloe management, the documents containing forged versions of my signature. I stored everything neatly in a separate folder. No advanced technical skills required. I simply did what I had always done, like a mother cleaning the house after a storm, quietly but with unwavering determination. There was no panic in my movements, only steadfast silence. Sometimes the strongest middle-aged women aren't the ones who speak sharply, but the ones who know how to sit down, calmly gather each fragment of truth, and piece together the picture others tried to destroy. I saved the final file and closed my laptop. The motel room still held only me, but this time, I no longer felt the loneliness of the night before. There was pain, yes, but intertwined with it was clarity. Just as I placed the laptop aside, my phone vibrated, a message from Ryan. I took a long breath before opening it. "Mom, stop making things difficult for Dad. I'm standing with him. I hope you understand." No words asking how I was. No, "Where are you, Mom?" No concern for the fact that I, a 52-year-old woman, was alone out in the night. I sat still for a long time, as if each word from my son was dropping slowly into my heart. I wasn't angry, just sad. A quiet, heavy sadness like night fog. I typed a line. "I understand. When you're older, you'll know who stood by you your whole life." But I deleted it. Every mother wants her child to be wise, to understand that years of sacrifice should not be forgotten. But some lessons cannot be taught in words. A child must experience them. I simply replied, "I respect your choice." After sending it, I set the phone down, feeling my heart tighten. A mother can endure many kinds of pain, but the pain of a child choosing someone else over her is always the deepest wound. Even so, I held on to something every mother knows. A child may lose their way, but if the mother stands firm, they will eventually find their way back. What matters is that she remains there, strong, kind, and steady. That night, I allowed myself to cry once more, not because Ryan disappointed me, but because I knew. To protect my child, I had to be strong first, even if that meant letting go for now so he could eventually see the truth for himself. I knew I could not fight this alone. Richard had a vast network, and many people respected the successful facade he maintained. If I wanted to bring the truth to light, I needed someone strong enough to stand beside me. The first name that came to mind was Ethan Vaughn. He had once been Richard's biggest rival in the real estate world of Riverside Heights. Years ago, Ethan nearly secured a prime piece of land before Richard secretly used underhanded tactics to steal the deal. Since then, There had always been an unspoken distance between them. Not open hostility, but a careful watchfulness between two men who understood each other all too well. I wasn't close to Ethan. We'd only met a few times at significant events, exchanging polite greetings. But I knew one thing. He was a man who valued fairness above everything, and he was the only one strong enough to counter Richard now. The day I went to Vaughn Development's headquarters, light rain fell over Riverside Heights. The drizzle was thin but cold, much like my own emotions at the time. I had once stood before boards of directors and tough investors, yet somehow my hands trembled slightly that day, perhaps because I was carrying not only documents but also a deeply wounded heart. Ethan met me in his office, a spacious, bright, orderly room that reflected a man who preferred clarity. He looked at me for a few seconds before inviting me to sit. No curiosity, no rush, no judgment. That alone made it easier for me to breathe. I opened my laptop and presented each file I had collected. I spoke slowly and clearly. No dramatization, no bitterness. Simply the truth as it was. Ethan listened without interrupting. His expression shifted from surprise to contemplation to visible respect. When I finished, the room fell silent for a few seconds. I could hear the faint rain against the window. My heart beat firmly but steadily, as though, after days of turmoil, I had finally found solid ground beneath my feet. Finally, Ethan said, "You've endured far too much, Linda, and the way you've faced all of this, I respect that." I lowered my head slightly, not out of modesty, but because his words touched the softest place in a woman who'd been overlooked for far too long. Ethan closed the laptop and pushed it gently back toward me. His voice wasn't dramatic, wasn't filled with grand promises. It was short and firm. "We will bring the truth to light. I'm helping you partly for justice, and partly for what Richard did years ago." I took a deep breath. For the first time in weeks, I felt I was no longer alone. Ethan stood and extended his hand. I stood as well, placing mine in his. Not a handshake between two people seeking victory, but a handshake between two people who understood that sometimes, to preserve what is right, we must stand together. "Thank you, Ethan," I said, my voice soft but steady. "Not for me," he replied, "for justice." In that moment, I knew my battle had entered a new chapter, a chapter where I was no longer the woman who had been betrayed, but the woman who stood up to defend truth, dignity, and her rightful value. The news that Richard and Chloe were getting married reached me sooner than I expected. Just 1 week after kicking me out of the house, they publicly announced to family and friends that they would hold a small, meaningful wedding, scheduled earlier than planned. My mother called, her voice strangely excited. "Linda, don't be upset. They suit each other. I think the wedding will bring joy to our family." I stayed silent, not because I was jealous, not because I was too hurt to speak, but because I knew that wedding would be the place where the truth would be revealed. I no longer felt resentment, anger, and blame. Those things would only make me like them. I chose calm because the older a woman gets, the more she understands that. Sometimes silence is the sharpest reply. On the phone, I said only, "Mom, go ahead and prepare. I wish them both happiness." But inside, I knew that would be a day they would never forget. The day I told Ethan about the wedding, he arranged a meeting with his lawyer, a composed man who paid attention to every word. Together, they drafted a divorce agreement that, on the surface, looked like I was conceding completely. I agreed not to demand a division of assets. I accepted that Richard keep the house and the company. I would receive only a small support payment to stabilize my life. At first glance, it resembled a surrender, and I knew Richard would like that. But buried in many pages was a small clause that few would notice. The agreement is immediately void if either party is proven to be involved in criminal acts, fraud, or embezzlement. No complicated wording, just a few lines. enough to make Richard sign his own downfall once the truth was exposed. The lawyer asked me, "Are you sure you want to do it this way? You'll have to act convincingly." I nodded. I had endured far greater hurts than pretending before Richard. The afternoon I met Richard at the law office, I chose an old sweater, no makeup, and hair tied low. I entered the room as if I had just been through a storm that left me unable to stand. Richard smirked as soon as he saw me. "Looks like life out there isn't treating you well." I lowered my head and spoke softly. "I don't want to fight anymore. I just want peace. I'll sign everything. Just let me go." Richard looked at me like someone who had just won an easy game. He didn't ask why I had changed. He didn't doubt my motives, because Richard had always believed I was weak. He took the pen and signed the agreement without carefully reading each clause. I watched his handwriting span across the page. No gloating, no triumph. Just a slight lightening in my chest. Not because I had gotten revenge on anyone, but because I knew. I had chosen not to be the woman who was pushed down, and instead to rise most calmly. When everything was finished, Richard said, "Good luck, Linda. I think Chloe and I's wedding will help everything end more gracefully." I replied simply, "Sure. The wedding will be a very memorable day." He smiled, not knowing that this would be the day his reputation, assets, and the truth about him would be revealed to everyone. I walked out of the office, the afternoon breeze brushing past, and for the first time in weeks I felt I was truly beginning to take back my life. Richard and Chloe's wedding took place at the Eleanor Grand Hotel, considered one of the most luxurious venues in Riverside Heights. Most guests were dignitaries, business people, and major partners Richard had cultivated to bolster his public image. Crystal chandeliers gleamed, soft music played, and banquet tables were set with expensive fare. Everything was arranged to look like a dream wedding. My mother, Marjorie, wore a champagne-colored dress and pinned a silver brooch in her hair. She walked around proudly, telling everyone, "Our family is so happy today. Our youngest daughter marrying a successful man like Richard is a blessing for the whole family." Only that day did I understand why she could so easily turn her back on me. She always favored glamour, and Richard provided that for her. But that same day she would see that not everything that shines is gold. I chose to enter the ceremony composed. No shouting, no scene, no hatred. I wore a well-tailored black suit, not to draw attention but to remind myself I was not there as the betrayed woman. I was there as a woman who had weathered storms and stood firm. When I appeared in the grand hall, many people's eyes turned to me in surprise. Some whispered, "Aren't they just divorced? What is she doing here?" I paid no mind. I looked straight ahead at Richard and Chloe standing at the altar, smiling as if their life would never know any truth beyond what they had created. Richard flinched when he saw me. Chloe frowned, clearly displeased by my presence. I offered a small smile, not resentful, not bitter, just enough to let them know I was no longer afraid of them. As the ceremony was about to begin, Ethan, seated among the guests, gave me a nod. I walked onto the stage and asked the MC for a few minutes. No one objected since I still bore the Harrington name. The name Richard hadn't yet removed from my business cards. I took the microphone, my voice soft and slow. "Congratulations to the two of you on your special day. But before anything continues, I believe those present deserve to know the truth." The hall fell suddenly silent. I raised my hand, the large screen behind me lit up. First documents showing transfers from Harrington Estates to Chloe's shell company. No one could speak. Next, a recording of Richard that captured him speaking with a friend. "Linda is worthless except for running the house. Once the agreement is signed, I'll cut her off. I just need the company." A few murmurs in the crowd, then silence. I moved to the final clip. A recording of Richard speaking to Chloe. "Ryan, I don't care. Let him go with whoever he wants. Once I'm done with Linda, he won't matter either." I had listened to that more than once and still felt a chill down my spine. And this time, Ryan heard it too. Ryan jumped to his feet from the guest pews, his face pale. His eyes looked at Richard as if he were a stranger. I looked down at my son. No accusation, no scolding, only sadness and a mother's undiminished love. I said very softly, "Even if you choose the wrong path, I hope you will see the truth." Ryan opened his mouth but could not find words at first. He looked at Richard, then at Chloe, then back at me. In that moment, I saw the child I had raised for 22 years begin to wake up. He stammered, "Mom, I'm sorry." It wasn't a perfect apology, but it eased my heart after so many stormy days. No sooner had the screen gone dark than the wedding hall doors opened. A few officers entered, holding investigation files. "Mr. Richard Harrington and Ms. Chloe Harrington, we have orders to detain you on suspicion of embezzlement." The wedding erupted in chaos. Guests backed away as if afraid of being implicated. Richard went pale. Chloe nearly collapsed. My mother, Marjorie, panicked and rushed forward. "My God, what is happening? Richard, Chloe!" I looked at her. No blame, no glee, only sadness. Sadness that she chose to side with the people who broke the family. Sadness that she valued glamour over kinship. Sadness that I had tried to hold everything together for her, only to be cast out. I simply said softly, "Mom, what was coming has come." For the first time in many years, I saw my mother unsteady, in a way she had never been before. Perhaps she realized that the things she trusted most were the quickest to fall away. And there I stood, amid the wedding hall's chaos, calmer than I had ever been, not because I had won, but because the truth had finally been returned to its rightful place. After that chaotic wedding day, I was granted the right to return to the home I had once been forced to leave. The feeling of stepping back into that house was strange, no longer sharp with pain like before, but hollow in a quiet way. Everything looked the same. The crooked painting I never got around to fixing, the dark walnut dining table, the sofa where Ryan and I used to watch movies together, but all of it was covered with a heavy layer of memories. I stood in the living room for a long moment, took a deep breath, and then called a renovation crew. I replaced everything. Not a single item was kept if it reminded me of the painful days. New sofa, new wall colors, new curtains. It was as if the entire house was shedding its old skin to prepare for a new life. When the new sofa was placed down, I sat on it. For the first time in months, my heart felt truly lighter. I didn't want to erase the past, I just no longer wanted it to decide my future. One afternoon, while I was arranging my bookshelf, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find my mother standing there with a small handbag, her face more tired than before. "Linda, I want to talk." I let her in and made her a cup of warm tea. She sat down, her hands clasped, trembling slightly. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice cracked. "About Chloe, about Richard. I was wrong. I shouldn't have let you endure all of that alone." I looked at my mother, neither angry nor resentful, just carrying a soft sadness. Like remembering something that could have been so much better. I set the tea down and said slowly, "I don't blame you, but from now on, I have to protect my own life." My mother lowered her head, tears falling from her eyes. Perhaps for the first time, she realized that the eldest daughter, who had always silently carried the burdens, was the one she had never truly understood. I held her hand for a while, saying nothing more. Some things don't need many words, only a gentle but clear boundary. Family is love, yes, but even love must have boundaries. Without them, the one who gets hurt most is always the one who knows how to yield. That evening, close to 9 p.m., I heard another knock on the door. I opened it and saw Ryan standing there, his jacket damp with the smell of rain. He looked at me, eyes red. "Mom, I'm sorry. Can I come in?" I didn't say anything. I simply stepped aside to let him in. Ryan sat on the couch, his hands clasped as though trying to steady himself. I heard everything at the wedding. I never imagined Dad would talk about you like that. I was foolish. I let them manipulate me like a child. I looked at my son, my heart softening. You're young, Ryan. Everyone loses their way sometimes. What matters is that you know how to return. He broke down, his words trembling. Are you still mad at me? I shook my head. I'm not angry, but I can't enable you anymore. If you want to stand strong, you must build your own life. No relying on others, no chasing illusions. Ryan nodded firmly. I understand. I'll go back to school. I'll get a part-time job, pay my own rent, take care of myself. Mom, don't worry about me. I smiled, a peaceful smile I hadn't felt in a long time. Ryan, I'll always care about you, but from now on, I want to care in the right way. You must truly grow. For the first time in these turbulent months, I felt that the sacred bond between mother and child was beginning to heal. Ryan hugged me for a long time, the hug I had waited for since the night I was pushed out of my home, and I understood. No matter how life changes, if a mother remains gentle and steady, her child will eventually find their way back. The case closed, and with it, a chapter of my life closed too. I didn't choose to return to the old company or seek further revenge. All I wanted was to build something of my own, something clean and honest. And so, Harrington Renewal Group was born. I chose the word renewal, meaning rebirth, not to remind myself of pain, but to remind myself that everyone deserves a chance to begin again. My new company doesn't focus on massive projects as it did before. Instead, it devoted itself to gentler, meaningful work. Building affordable homes for older adults living alone, repairing old neighborhoods, creating jobs for middle-aged women who had lost their direction. When I saw older adults move into their new homes and older women smile because they had steady work again, I felt a warmth deeper than anything prestige or money had ever brought me. I realized that sometimes a peaceful life is all that is needed. After that wedding day, Ethan stayed in touch, not in a way that created misunderstandings, but with the respect of two seasoned adults who understand life and people. Sometimes he would invite me for coffee, ask about the new company, or share industry insights. Sometimes I brought him documents to review, always receiving thoughtful feedback. There were no empty promises or rushed emotions between us. Just gentle companionship, two people walking a long road, not needing to hold hands, yet knowing they were not alone. To me, Ethan was not someone meant to replace anyone. He was simply the person who appeared at the moment I needed to rediscover my worth, and sometimes that is enough. Looking back, I realized family is only truly family when respect exists. Without respect, everything is just form. Mothers, elders, those who sacrificed half a lifetime deserve genuine appreciation. No one has the right to treat their sacrifices as automatic. Forgiveness brings lightness, but forgiveness must have limits. Otherwise, it becomes an excuse for others to hurt us more. And above all, it is never too late for a woman to rebuild her life. Whether at 40, 50, or 60, as long as she dares to rise, she has already won. Life is not measured by the years we endured, but by the days we lived in alignment with our true worth. And I, Linda Harrington, finally found that path for myself. If my story made you feel stronger or helped you believe that women at any age deserve love and respect, please like and subscribe so we can continue sharing meaningful stories together. You may also leave a comment about the city you live in or share experiences in your own family that helped you grow. Thank you for staying with me until the end. Wishing you peace, strength, and wholeness in your own journey.